Hi, I'm Dave Edwards, back to share the books that I read during the month of May. So, in the last month, I read a historical account of a former president, tips on improving your communication skills, poisons all around us, and all about cryptocurrency. I can recommend three of them wholeheartedly. Some time ago, I decided that I wanted to read significant books on American presidents. So I asked around to my friend group, I took recommendations online, and one book that kept coming up about Ronald Reagan was called President Reagan, The Role of a Lifetime. It's by Lou Cannon. Now, this book came out about 25 years ago, and despite being 900 plus pages, one of the longest books I've read in a long time, I really enjoyed all of the stories and insights that Cannon shared. Now, depending on how old you are, you may already know that Reagan had a very successful career as a Hollywood actor before he entered politics. He became governor of California, and despite a lot of people saying it would never happen, ultimately became president of the United States. His election was really very critical because it started, in my opinion, the new conservative movement in this country. And his politics reshaped American politics. People still talk about it today. He fostered what was called Reaganomics. That included tax cuts, deregulation, and an emphasis on free market principles. There were also things that people could point to as the successes of his administration. He reversed high inflation and soaring interest rates and rising unemployment rates. So he was a pretty popular president at the time, but critics also argued that a lot of these policies increased the income inequality in this country, that the wealthy were the ones who benefited from his administration. There were a lot of other interesting stories in this book. His confrontations with the Soviet Union, calling it an evil empire, and his commitment to building up the U.S. military and its strengths, and how that contributed to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. He was criticized, of course, for his handling of many social issues, including the AIDS epidemic. But for me, I'm just a sucker for behind-the-scenes elements of the presidency. We learned that his management style was oriented towards, delegating important projects and decisions in some case, that could be very detached from the day-to-day operations of the White House. He relied heavily on his advisors to make decisions. That caused power struggles and conflicts within his administration. I mean, he focused on communication and public relations. That also meant there were ultimate challenges in implementing policy and a lot of turmoil internally in the White House. Lou Cannon had a very unique vantage point. He covered the Reagan administration for the Washington Post, so he saw all this firsthand. Frankly, it took me a long time to read the 900 pages, but that was because there was so much to absorb. So this is a book I wholeheartedly recommend if you are a student of American government. President Reagan, The Role of a Lifetime by Lou Cannon. The second book I read in May was called The Most Delicious Poison, The Story of Nature's Toxins, From Spices to Vices. The author, Noah Whiteman, is an evolutionary biologist, and he shares the stories that, there are toxins all around us. Some can be deadly, some can be even beneficial. He talks about how various natural poisons, including psychedelics and nicotine and opioids, have evolved and have been utilized in both harmful and beneficial ways. Interesting story. I happen to really like butterflies in my yard. He talked about monarch butterflies ingesting milkweed toxins, and that's their way of deterring predators. Another interesting story, how rubber trees produce latex to protect against herbivores. He discussed how substances like caffeine and alcohol have some weird effects that can be, again, both beneficial and harmful depending on their dosage. A lot of good anecdotes, a lot of wow moments. So that's a good book to read too. It's called Most Delicious Poison, The Story of Nature's Toxins, From Spices to Vices. The next book is Number Go Up. Inside Crypto's Wild Rise and Staggering Fall. It's by Bloomberg journalist Zeke Foe. It's the story of cryptocurrency and covers a lot of the truths behind the currency. Now, I'll admit up front, I knew very little about cryptocurrency, and that's one of the reasons why I picked up this book. The first part is very helpful in letting you understand how cryptocurrencies work. We're introduced to some of the shady characters who've profited from their launch. But the book and the part of it that had the most impact on me was a rather sobering account of pig butchering, which gets people hooked into various fraudulent schemes. And along the way, we see how people are actually enslaved to work to find people willing to be scammed. An interesting anecdote. Because of the computer power needed to maintain cryptocurrencies, it became a drain on electricity, and so-called miners sought the cheapest place to store their computer servers. In 2012, Puerto Rico created huge tax breaks to attract wealthy people from the mainland, move to the island and pay no federal tax, no taxes on capital gains, and only 4% on Puerto Rican income. Needless to say, many crypto operators moved to Puerto Rico. Scam artists saw profits to be made. That's where the pig butchering begins. The author got texts from Vicky Ho, who attempts to flirt her way into Foe's pockets when she asks him to send her cryptocurrencies. Butchering is a Chinese term for romance schemes that involve slowly establishing a person's trust before stealing from them. So the scam sent the author to Vietnam and Cambodia, where these large pig butchering operations are run. Those who are tricked into working in these operations either have to meet financial quotas or they can face torture or even death. Although some of the sections of the book, which explain the workings of cryptocurrencies, spreadsheets, and key players' excesses can be a bit tedious, Number Go Up is both interesting and informative, particularly for those interested in learning more about this financial phenomenon. I wasn't sure what to expect from this book. I learned a lot, though, about the story of the scammers, and that was really depressing. I have mixed feelings about my fourth book, Supercommunicators: How to Unlock the Secret Language of Connection by Charles Duhigg. In the book, he describes three types of conversations that people have. He categorizes them into practical decision-making. What's this really about? Emotional, how do we feel? And social identity, who are we? Recognizing and aligning these conversation types, he writes, is crucial for effective communication. Duhigg's books have a lot of fans. Besides this one, I read Power of Habit. Maybe it's his style of writing, but I found both his books to be interesting, but nothing that I could really actively use in my life. You may like it more than I did. The book is called Supercommunicators: How to Unlock the Secret Language of Connection by Charles Duhigg. So that's what I read in the last month. What about you? I'd love to get your recommendations. Post them below. I love to read books that my viewers and friends suggest to me.